I must admit I had no idea what it meant to be a real motherfucker before July the 5th, 1995. I'd heard stories and I'd seen many a pretender, but to see a genuine motherfucker in all his glory for myself was an incredible experience. I should first define in general terms what it means to be a motherfucker. I am sure there will be those who disagree with my definition, but know that I realize there are many types. Motherfucker is a diverse noun. I would argue that it is the singularly most diverse word from any language. Add any adverb to the noun and you instantly have a recognizable person. Smelly, lazy, tedious, arrogant, feminist, government, royal, purple, silly, grampy, etc. Universally though, motherfucker has, at its core, always been about those who inspire some level of awe. The type of mofo I have in mind is fearless and lives by a set of rules. If you have ever seen The Shootist, then you know the kind of motherfucker I'm talking about. Even if you've not seen the movie, you'll understand. The Shootist was the last film John Wayne starred in before his death in June of 1979. In the film, Wayne plays an aging gunfighter who is described as the most celebrated shootist extant. In one particular scene, Wayne's character, J.B. Brooks, is having a conversation with a young man named Gillum, played by Ron Howard. During the discussion, Gillum asks, "Mr. Brooks, how'd you ever kill so many men?" Without missing a beat, Brooks replied, "Lived most of my life in the wild country and set a code of laws to live by." "What laws?" asked Gillum, to which Brooks answered, "I won't be wronged, I won't be insulted, I won't be laid a hand on. I don't do these things to other people, I require the same from them." Henceforth, every mention of the word motherfucker and all its derivatives will be referring to the description as mentioned above. As I stated earlier, this was July the 5th, 1995. It was a hot one in the little blue-collar town where I grew up. My hometown is a steel town. Most dads in town worked at the mill when I was a kid. My father had just retired the previous year after working there 44 years, and as part and parcel for a blue-collar town, there was a tavern on just about every other corner. The opposite corners either had a Catholic church or a pawn shop. My friend Travis and I had been out that muggy night patronizing a few of the local watering holes, as young men do in their 20s. After a long night of celebrating our nation's independence by consuming large quantities of alcohol, and after several unsuccessful attempts to cajole some female company, we decided we should have something to eat. For many folks, it's off to Denny's or IHOP after last call. Well, in my town, you went to Kate's Diner. You could buy 2 eggs, fried potatoes, toast, and a bottomless cup of coffee for $3.25. This greasy spoon catered to steelworkers starting or finishing their shifts, as well as the general inebriated public. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine a large, open gravel lot with several craterous-like potholes that were never filled in, just avoided. For regular customers, no big deal, just drive around. For the uninitiated, many a front end was sacrificed in pursuit of a cheap hot breakfast served around the clock. A long, 8-foot-tall chain-link fence provided the backdrop for this eatery that sat in the center of this small gravel desert. A single pole with a transformer and an obnoxiously bright light served as the building's only permanent companions in the otherwise lonely surroundings. One might expect to be approached by a lot lizard from the looks of the area, and on several occasions we were. The outside of this diner was once, I imagine, an inviting pale yellow in color with a bright neon red open sign. I also guess that this lasted maybe a month. You see, Kate's was across the street from the steel mill. Every night, the mill's smokestacks would cough up their contents, spilling millions of particulates into the air that would coat everything within a mile radius or so. The homes near the mill were always filthy. Shotgun houses and 4-family flats streaked with years of soot. If you didn't know any better, you'd look at the houses and think its occupants were trashy people. This wasn't necessarily the case. Nothing short of painting your home quarterly and keeping your vehicle in a hermetically sealed garage each night could mitigate the effects. Those living closest to the mill were the poorest. They couldn't afford to live outside the ring of loveliness that was downtown. Travis and I pulled into Kate's Diner a little past 3 a.m. It was a busy night. The lot was fairly full for Kate's, but we found a spot next to a tow truck. This close to the mill, you could smell the sulfur thick in the air, which always made it stink like a big fart downtown. Not an appetizing odor when you're going for a meal, but this is just how it was. We were immune to it. Walking inside, I heard the ring of the bell from above the door and spotted Helen behind the counter. Imagine one of the waitresses from that TV show Alice back in the 70s. Look it up if you're under 40. She was typically walking around with a coffee pot in one hand and a plate of food in the other. As I sat, I looked left and right down the counter at the other customers. Travis sat to my right, along with several other folks spaced out to the end. To my left were two stools, one open and one occupied by an old man asleep in front of a half-empty cup of coffee and an ashtray full of butts. Next to Travis was the operator of the tow truck. He wore a mechanic's shirt covered in grease that reeked of sweat. I instantly respected the man. I sincerely wish I could remember his name. In my mind, I see it embroidered on his shirt but cannot read what is written. For the sake of the story, let's name him Mike. In retrospect, he looked like a Mike, probably with a last name like O'Brien or Grotowski. He was not a small man either. It was hard to tell how tall he was from a seated position, but after he stood later on, I realized he was as tall as I, and I was 6'2". He had a beer belly, but strong, hardened arms decorated with navy tattoos. He had curly salt and pepper hair down to his shoulders and a hat on that matched his shirt. He had several weeks' worth of beard growth and had just been given a fresh cup of coffee. As Travis and I sat, he turned his attention to us and said, "You boys have a good 4th? I just finished a 12-hour shift and a six-pack myself." Then he chuckled. You could see the deep laugh lines in the corners of his eyes, which were sparkling blue. "Do you ever come in here without having finished a six-pack?" teased Helen as she slid Travis and me 2 menus and poured us both a cup of coffee. "You don't expect me to come in here sober, do you?" asked Mike. Shaking her head and giggling, she looked at us both and said, "Don't listen to a word he says. He's a troublemaker." "Troublemaker? No, ma'am. I'm a motherfucker." Helen walked off, still shaking her head and grinning, while Mike gave us a smile and a wink from one of his bloodshot eyes. "Well, how did you become a motherfucker?" asked my friend Travis. I knew he was sparking an impromptu conversation meant to entertain our drunken sophomoric humor. "Military taught me how to be a motherfucker. Well, I'm pretty sure I was cut out to be one from birth." "Where are you boys from?" he asked. "Right from here, born and raised," I said, while Travis affirmed the same. "I live out in Shippers Beach myself, but I was born in Monroe and lived there until I joined the Navy back in '68. Either of you boys serve in the military?" he asked. Travis and I both told him no. Then a bit of shame crept over me as I'd wanted to join after high school, but couldn't due to a spinal issue as a child. However, that shame was quickly replaced with pride as I proclaimed, "My dad was a Marine." "Did he serve in Vietnam? That'd be a hell of a coincidence if I had served alongside your daddy," he said. "No, he served during the Korean War." "Infantry?" he asked, but I shook my head. "No, it's kind of a funny story, actually. My dad went through boot camp and was about to be shipped out to Korea with his unit, and the day before they were to leave, he was pulled aside and told he was going to heavy equipment school. When he asked why, they explained that it was based on his previous experience as a crane man. You see, he'd worked at the mill for about a year before he went into the Marines. Apparently, he ran some little crane at the mill for a short period of time and had put that down in his original paperwork. However, the crane he was referring to was a tiny little machine that required no skill whatsoever. Had he not marked that down, he would have gone over for sure." "He was lucky then." The conversation paused a few moments while we gave our orders to Helen. Seeing the lull, my friend said, "My dad was a fighter pilot during World War II. He served in the Royal Canadian Air Force." "No shit?" asked Mike with genuine surprise on his face. He then pointed to the both of us and said, "Your old man and your old man? Now I know those guys are motherfuckers. I don't even know them, and I know that. Much respect to your dads." He lifted his cup of coffee in salute, then took a sip. "What did you do in the Navy?" I asked. "I was a corpsman." He then reached in his back pocket and pulled out a wallet that had seen at least 2 decades. Diving into this rat-packed mobile archive of his life, Mike produced a dog-eared black and white picture and held it up with a smile. "That's me and my mom. I had just turned 19 and was on leave before being shipped out." The man holding the photo and the image of the boy in the picture was stark in contrast. In his hand was the image of a young man freshly made and packaged for the world. The man holding the photo was much older, with deep lines of experience notched in his hands and written across his face. However, there were 2 distinct identifying characteristics upon closer inspection. His eyes and that toothy grin now stained with 30 years of coffee and nicotine. "My mother passed shortly after this was taken, while I was on active duty," he said as he carefully replaced the picture. "Be good to your mothers. You never know when they may not be there." He shook his wallet in our direction to accentuate his point. Then he put it back in his rear pocket. "I was only 19, just a kid. I think that's too young to lose your mother." I nodded my head in agreement as I had lost my mother at 15. I thought to mention that to him, but I was in a good mood and I wanted to keep it that way. "What kinds of things do you have to do to be a motherfucker?" asked my friend. "Did you have sex with a bunch of mothers?" "Why are you so interested in being a motherfucker? Are you wanting to be one?" the pickled tow truck driver asked as he leaned in Travis's direction. Hell yeah, I want to know all about being a motherfucker. You gonna teach me? I can do it, but you need to fully commit. I'd also need to know you understand how motherfuckers acts and shit. I mean, you know, you can't be full of shit. That's lesson number 1. You cannot be full of shit. Write that down. You should write it down. It's important. He was trying to look serious, which was hard for him to do since he was wobbling to and fro and slurring his words. I was genuinely concerned that he'd fall off his stool at any moment, but somehow he maintained his balance. The drunk was strong with this one. I got it. I'll remember it, replied Travis. You better, because that's really important. No fucking bullshit, and yeah. Trailing off for a moment, he stared directly ahead, then slowly looked to his coffee cup and seemed to choose the middle one. I think I drink more than a 6-pack. I promise I'll remember. If not, my friend here will remember for me. So tell me, how does a motherfucker act? Asked the young apprentice of the master. Well, for one, you don't take any shit. There's a bunch of shit-related rules to being a motherfucker, just a warning. But that's rule number 2. Don't be a pussy. His big grin reappeared, then he focused on lighting his cigarette. Alright, don't spread any shit, and don't take any shit. Got it. Give me an example of not taking any shit. I understand the idea, but what does it look like in practical application? Said Travis as he helped steady Mike's hand, which was attempting to light his cigarette. Thank you, he said as he drew on his smoke. Let me see. He looked upwards in thought and blew smoke into the air. I watched that large plume ascend and then mingle with the hazy atmosphere of the little diner, which was already thick with smoke from the grill and other smoking customers. Well, I had a guy try and rob me recently. Some crackhead piece of shit. He called for a tow down in Royal Township, which is a bad enough area, but he tells me he's broken down in the lot next to the old slaughter yards, and on top of that, it's 4 o'clock in the fucking morning. I didn't think it was too big a deal. I don't get a lot of calls for that area, but it happens, so I go. I pull into the lot, put on the breaker lights, and I don't see any fucking car, man. So I drive off across the road to the one payphone in the area at that JR's liquor store there. I park right next to the payphone on the right side of the building there, right next to the dumpster, and get out to call this number this motherfucker gave me. I start digging in my pocket for a quarter, and just as I'm doing this, I notice that the number on the payphone is the same number this fucking turd had given me. Well, I realized what was happening just as some jittery crackhead motherfucker pops out from around the dumpster with a pistol, and he says, "Give me your wallet, motherfucker, do it now or I'll fucking kill you, man." What did you do? I asked, fully engrossed into the story. Well, I was pissed. That cocksucker made me drive all the way to that fucked up area just so he could rob me. All I could do was think about smashing his fucking head open with that pistol he's holding. I pulled my wallet out real nice, though, just as he asks. I held it up in front of me and said, "There's not much in it, but I'll give you the cash I have." I was just going to give him the $100 I had, but I didn't want to give him my wallet. "Just give me the fucking wallet, motherfucker. Throw it over here." I told him no. I didn't want to give him my whole wallet, I said. "I have $100 in here, just take it, man, but the wallet is too important. I can't just give it to you. Just take the money, man, come on. Get your money and go smoke your shit. I don't give a fuck. Just take the cash." No, he wants to be a dick. "Motherfucker, I ain't gonna ask you again. Give me that fucking wallet right now." And then he walks up to me and puts the gun right in my face. Wrong move, dude. I reached up, grabbed his twig-like arm, and I jerked a pistol right out of his hand. He didn't know what the fuck to do, so he tries to run, and I still got his arm. I pull him in close to me and bash that pistol right across his fucking face, and he drops like a sack of shit. And then I thought to myself, this is convenient. There's a payphone right here. I called 911 and I reported it. Here's the fun part, though. As I'm standing there, holding this fucking crackhead down, he starts cussing me out. Me, like he has a reason to be pissed at me. I also noticed that there's a wallet in his back pocket. I grab it, open it up, and the motherfucker's got $60 in there. He says, "Man, that's my fucking wallet. Leave my fucking wallet alone, motherfucker. I'm gonna kill you." I said, yeah. And while he's bitching and squirming, I took his ID out, pocketed the $60, then chucked that wallet on top of the roof of the liquor store. Both Travis and I started laughing and were soon joined by Mike. "So wait a minute," I said. "Let me make sure I understand this. You get lured to a seedy part of town to pick up some broke-down dude at 4 a.m. You get there, see no car, Go over to the nearest payphone to call this guy, and it just so happens that the payphone's number was the same one given to you by the dude. And then said dude jumps out of the dark and tries to rob you. However, he ends up getting robbed by you, and he gets arrested. That is fucking amazing. We all three burst into laughter once again. Oh, you should have heard him complaining to the cops, man. He told him I stole his money and that I came out of nowhere while he was on a call and got rolled. Right, I do that shit all the time. Drive down to shitty areas in the wee hours of the morning just looking for some fucking crackhead to rob. Fucking please, you piece of shit. Fuck you. The one cop, he asked me, he says, did you take his wallet? I said, no, I threw his wallet on the roof of the liquor store, but not before I grabbed his ID, and I handed it to him, and the $60 in there. I figured that'll cover my time and trouble. Cop says, sounds about right to me. Then he looks at the crackhead and reads off the name from the ID I just handed him and says to the dude, you want a receipt for that $60? I fucking laughed my ass off the whole way home. So that would be an example of not taking any shit. Damn, man, that's badass, said Travis. You ever watch Beavis and Butthead? Who? Beavis and Butthead. You teach me how to be a motherfucker and I'll show you everything you need to know about Beavis and Butthead. You have to say things like, I have no tipi for my bunghole, Cornholio. And you have to laugh like this. I have no tipi for my bunghole. Travis had just convinced Mike to attempt the Beavis laugh when I heard the bell above the door ring and in walked 4 young men. All 4 were sweaty, dressed in jeans and t-shirts, and all with matching scowls on their faces. There were only 3 open stools. The old man sitting near me on the end had gotten up at some point to use the restroom. You could clearly tell his seat was occupied, but 2 of the 4 sat, one taking his place, while the other 2 stood behind them. That seat on the end there is taken, actually. The gentleman's in the restroom, I said as I motioned toward the pair. Well, he's not fucking here now, is he? Answered the man sitting in the stool. You boys can't sit in that seat, it's taken. Besides, we don't have enough empty seats for all 4 of you. Why don't you all just come back another time? Helen had obviously recognized what was happening, and I could see the concern in her eyes. I, however, was now a passive participant as the man disengaged me and redirected his gaze to her. It was like watching 2 objects about to collide. I couldn't really tell what was going to happen. However, from the look on the man's face and the shitty grins being displayed by his companions, a problem was brewing. The pock-marked, dark, greasy-haired 20-something-year-old kid, who was obviously the leader of this quartet, sneered at her. We're paying customers. Our money no good? We can wait. Soon as others finish up, we'll take their seats. His stoolmate was now helping himself to the old man's cigarettes as if he had permission. How about 4 cups of coffee to go, huh? No charge, she pleaded while also eyeing the tow truck driver in an attempt to grab his attention, but to no avail. Still unaware of what was happening, Travis and Mike started up another round of Beavis laughs. They were like 2 junior high kids fucking off in the lunchroom, just having fun. What the fuck's wrong with those 2? They fucking retarded or something? Asked the antagonist loud enough to capture everyone's attention. He was staring down the counter at Travis and Mike, who were both now looking in his direction. I'm trying to place an order and you guys are making those stupid noises so loud I can't talk. Take it easy, man. We're just making fun of some show, said my friend Travis. I know you boys. You're Greeley boys, chimed in Mike. Yeah, I went to school with your daddy and his brothers. The young man's tone changed suddenly as the recognition settled in. I know who you are, Mike. Well, good. I am sure you boys are going to be well behaved then, aren't you? Said Mike as his face transitioned from pleasant to serious. This time he was far more convincing. During the exchange, the old man had reappeared and was making his annoyance known to the squatter found in his seat. That's my seat and those are my cigarettes, he complained while pointing at the smoking Greeley boy. I said before, we don't have enough room right now. You'll have to come back some other time, Helen proclaimed, her confidence boosted by Mike's entrance into the conversation. We just want some breakfast. We're not causing any trouble. She's acting like she don't want us here. He wasn't giving Helen the respect of acknowledging her. The statement directed to Mike can be interpreted as, we'll behave, just don't make us leave. Even with his reinforcements nearby, he was obviously not wanting to lock horns with Mike. He was trying to negotiate a solution that saved his pride. She just said there's not enough room. His tone now lacking any cordiality, Mike turned his stool to fully face the 4 young cubs. This can be interpreted as, you've been given the only option you're going to get, and it's time to leave. Waffle House is still open, and so is Denny's. I can even call you boys a cab. You go outside, and I'll call a taxi, then bring you all a cup of coffee, okay? Helen saw an opportunity to facilitate a peaceful resolution by offering conciliatory gestures meant to appease the intruders. But again, her pleas were ignored as the two alphas eyed each other up. Fuck it, the food here sucks anyway. Finally deciding his best course of action was a well-organized retreat, he stood and did his best to muster as much dignity as possible as walking out. The venomous looks he cast at the older, wiser, and much larger man while walking out promised he wasn't going to forget this slight. As a final insult to the young man, Mike smiled and said, "Alright, boys, tell your dad and your uncles I said hi," while turning his back mid-sentence. He didn't even furnish the young man with a look in the eye as he said it. Smoldering, the boy's face was a silent scream of rage. As soon as the last future probie exited, everyone seemed to let out a sigh of relief. Mike, however, was focused on the biscuits and gravy that had just been presented before him. It was as if the last several minutes had never even transpired. I was a little surprised at how he was not reacting to what had just happened. Didn't he know he'd just backed down 4 grown men without even standing up? I wanted to talk about what had just occurred right then and ask him questions, but before I could, both Travis and I's breakfast appeared, interrupting my thoughts. For the next few moments, each of us paid attention to our meals and spoke not a word. Travis was the first one to speak. "Is that another example of being a motherfucker?" "What, that? Nah, they're just kids," he said and shook his head in between bites. "They all got bad reputations, but I think they can be better. I mean, they ain't been raised right. They just need to be told no and have someone mean it." Huh, I thought to myself. It was as simple as that. The man was disciplining them, correcting their behavior. "But you look like you were totally serious. I thought you were going to start throwing punches or something," I said. The beer-bellied wrecker operator just smiled while chewing his food, and after he swallowed, he said, "Well, if I didn't look like I meant it, which I did, he wouldn't have believed me. I know I would have called my bluff if I thought I was full of shit. Remember, don't be full of shit, and don't take any shit. You can throw mean it in there if you want." I was impressed. He wasn't bluffing. Now I completely believed his earlier story. This was a man who said what he meant and meant what he said. Cliché, sure, but call a spade a spade. My initial respect for him doubled as I smiled to myself. The doorbell rang, and before I could even register what was happening, I lost the ability to hear everything but muffled pops for the next 15 seconds. At first, I thought it was the Greeley boys storming in, guns blazing, but when I saw the confetti rainfall, I realized it was just a brick of firecrackers. I also noticed that during this time, Mike was just looking at his food. Everyone else was trying to scream something to one another while holding their hands over their ears. The diner was utterly full of smoke, and I was deafened by the ringing in my head. I could hear others talking, but it was as if they were speaking through pillows. Everything was dulled. Mike was shaking his head and picking debris from his breakfast. Son of a bitch. That part I read on his lips. He then looked to Travis and I and started to get up. "Mike, don't go out there," Helen was saying. "It's not worth it." Travis grabbed Mike's arm and said, "Do you want us to come with you?" "Nah, I got this. I'm just going to go talk to them. No reason to be worried. You guys just stay here and enjoy your breakfast." Then he walked out quite calmly, which reassured both Travis and me. Travis then walked up to the door to peer out and see what was happening. "Everything all right?" I asked from my stool. "Seems to be. He's just talking to them and they don't seem to be yelling or anything." Travis then returned to his seat and said, "I guess everything's just fine." "Dude, what the fuck?" I asked eloquently, summing up all the chaotic events in a straightforward question. "I have no idea, man, but who the fuck are the Greeley boys and why have I never heard of them?" asked Travis. "I'm not sure, dude, but I'm thankful I don't know them. They sound like a real shitbag family." I took a few sips of my coffee while we both sat silently, not eating our meals. We were both running over the data collected and cataloging what we had learned. "You still gonna enroll in MoFo U?" I asked laughingly. "I don't know, man. I think I'm just happy being the apprentice right now," said Travis as we shared a chuckle. "I cannot believe you were having him do Beavis laugh impressions. You have to tell him to start watching that show, man. I bet you anything he'd become a fan. He's a pretty funny motherfucker too, isn't he? Speaking of which, he's been out there a few minutes now." Before Travis could respond, the bell over the door rang once more. We both turned around and saw Mike walking in. He had a gash on his left forearm that was open and bleeding, and he was using his shirt to wipe off the blood. It's not like he was super concerned about staining his uniform. The pocket was ripped out and the left bottom of his shirt was torn and hanging like a rag, and he was drenched in sweat. I gotta use the restroom real quick, was the only thing he said before walking off to clean up a bit. Travis and I looked at each other quickly and ran to the door. As we peered out into the lot, we could see two of the brothers carrying their leader to their car. He didn't even look conscious. The fourth brother was on his hands and knees vomiting. His pant leg was torn from the bottom of the leg all the way up the seam. We slowly walked back to our stools. I was trying to make sense of what I had just seen, and I assumed so was Travis. There had obviously been a brawl, but who did what and how did it start? The man who could answer those questions soon returned, slightly less disheveled. He didn't even say a word other than, "Helen, can I get some fresh coffee?" and sat back down to his now cold meal. "You bet, hun. Peggy's back fixing you up another plate of biscuits and gravy, too. No charge, either. Your meal's on me," said Helen as she provided him a fresh cup and removed the confetti-littered breakfast. Once again, he was back in character as if nothing had happened. I was looking at him, hoping for a detailed account of the fight. I noticed he had a sizable puffy knot under his left eye that would unquestionably blacken. "What happened?" Travis was quick to ask. The conversation got away from me. "Hey, you boys got a light? I can't find my lighter," he asked, standing up and patting himself down. "Sure, here," and I handed him my lighter. "Thanks." He then proceeded to fire up a smoke and sip his coffee. "No, I was trying to be civil, but he was hell-bent on being a child." "What did he do?" asked Travis. "Oh, he thought he'd run me off with a big stick. He pulled a club out of his car and he swung on me." Again, he was leaving out big chunks of the story. I needed to know more. "How did your arm get gashed like that?" "I swung that club at me and I blocked it like this," he said, holding up his forearm to demonstrate. "What did you do then?" Travis was just as eager as I to gather the whole story. "I took it from him and I used it on him a bit." Taking another drag from the smoke, he refocused his attention on his coffee. "Looks like more than a bit," said Travis. "Two of them were carrying him to their car. He didn't look too good." "No, I expect he's not doing awfully well right now. He'll be fine. I didn't do any permanent damage." "One of them has his pant leg ripped all the way up the seam and he was puking his guts up. How did that happen?" I asked. "Oh, that was a game of tug-of-war. You see, after I worked his brother over, he come in like a wild devil, kicking and screaming. He managed to kick the club right out of my hand. Well, I grabbed his leg when he tried to kick me next and was dragging him by his pant leg over to where the club was. I was going to go using on him a bit." "You were going to work him over with the same club you used to work his brother over?" I asked, trying to contain my laughter. "Well, that was the general idea. But the two brothers still standing came over and grabbed the same pant leg to try and pull him back. For a minute or so I thought I might win, but the seam on his pant leg gave away and I lost my grip," explained Mike. "Well, why was he puking? Did you punch him in the stomach or something?" I asked. "No, that was from my foot. I kicked him in the nuts a couple times after I chased his brothers off with that big stick. Maybe I did us all a favor and he'll not be able to breathe." That toothy grin was back on his face. "Why'd you kick him in the nuts?" asked Travis. "Well, what should I have done? Give him a kiss?" Mike retorted. "Looks like you have successfully demonstrated what it means to be a motherfucker, sir. I am honored to have met you." Travis stuck out his hand to shake, which Mike accepted. "You still want to be a motherfucker?" asked Mike. "If you do, be down here tomorrow at 3 p.m. Me and a buddy of mine will be here." "What for?" asked Travis. "I'm going to go over to the Greeleys tomorrow and have a talk with them boys and their daddy. Might get ugly." I was amazed. He was entirely serious. "You mean this isn't over?" "Not by a long shot," he said. Travis slowly shook his head no and said, "Mister, I don't think I'm ready to be a motherfucker yet. I'll have to think about it." "Well, if you boys change your mind, you know where I'll be tomorrow at 3 p.m. He flashed his smile again just as Helen brought his remade order. There wasn't much conversation between the three of us after that. Travis and I finished up our meals and settled up our bill. We bid our farewells and wished Mike luck in the future. As we drove home that night, we recounted the events and tried to fill in the gaps. We speculated about what things he might have seen when he was in Vietnam and what experiences made him the man he was today. I never saw Mike again, but I'd hear about him occasionally. Helen would bring us up to speed on any happenings throughout our repeat visits over the next several months. Kate's is gone now. The land was purchased years ago and the building demolished. One of those buy here, pay here car lots now stand in its place where many memories were made over the years. Mike would most likely be in his 70s now, and I expect he is no less a motherfucker today as he was all those years ago, even if he's still alive. I like to think that he is. Maybe I'll finally learn his real name someday, way in the future. Perhaps I'll even visit his grave and pay my respects. If that's the case, I'll scrawl this epithet into his headstone. here lies Mike. He was a motherfucker. He helped some grow up, he helped some behave. He was friendly and kind, but don't step on his grave. He'll not suffer the insult.